Kvod Harav, Rav Spagnoletto, Chief Rabbi of Florence, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence. Rabbi Chazan of Milan and Chabad of Italy, your wonderful shliach here in Florence, Kvod Harav Rav Volvosky, and to leaders and members of the Florence Jewish community. My apologies for speaking in English. My Italian vocabulary after several days here only extends to 3 words, and they don't take us very far. I will try to speak as simply as I can. Once, George Bernard Shaw, the great English or Irish dramatist, was asked to give a lecture on English literature. "How long do I have?" asked Shaw, and the organizer said, 10 minutes. George Bernard Shaw said, "How am I supposed to say everything I know about English literature in 10 minutes?" And the organizer replied, "Speak very slowly." So I will try to speak very slowly. Friends, it is a privilege to be even briefly in the presence of this extraordinary Italian Jewish community, which is one of the longest lived of any Jewish communities in the world, going way back more than 2,000 years. The Masechet Pesachim already mentions Todos Ish Romi. It already mentions the Roman Jewish community in a Pesach context in the Mishnah. And this incredible Jewish community of Florence goes back some 7 centuries and has included extraordinary, extraordinary figures. So it is a privilege to be in your midst, and thank you for inviting my family and myself. Friends, let me just speak very briefly in terms of Pesach and what it says to us now. There's a bit of the Haggadah which I take very personally. It says, Omar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Hare ani keven shivim shana. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, I am like a man of 70. The Talmud says, why does he say like a man of 70? And it replies he was actually only 18 years old, but they wanted him to become chief rabbi, and he said, first I must ask my wife. You can only be a rabbi if first you ask your wife. And his wife said, you have every qualification except one, you look too young. And a miracle happened, says the Talmud, and his hair went gray overnight. I can testify that that miracle happens every time somebody is chosen to be the head of a Jewish community. When I was chosen to be chief rabbi in Britain at the age of 42, they said to me, aren't you a little young for the job? And I said, don't worry, in this job I will age rapidly. However, the passage goes on to say this. V'lo zachiti she'te'ama yetziat Mitzrayim baleilot ad shedrasha ben Zoma. I never understood why we should tell the going out of Egypt at night until Ben Zoma explained it. And this is what Ben Zoma said. It is written, Laman tizkor et yom tzetecha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yomei chayecha. It is written, you shall remember the going out of Egypt all the days of your life. Had it just said the days, I would have understood that means daytime. Kol yomei chayecha, all the days, includes night. V'chachamim omrim, but the sages say, yomei chayecha olam hazeh, the days of your life refers to this age. Kol yomei chayecha lavi yomot HaMashiach, to include the Messianic age. And that is the passage we read every year in the Haggadah. However, it doesn't end there. We leave out the end of the narrative. And if you look up the source in the Talmud in Brachot, Daf Yud Beit Amud Beit, the passage continues. Why did Ben Zoma not agree with the sages that Kol Yomei Chayecha was coming to include the Messianic age? And the Talmud says this: Amar lahem Ben Zoma lechachamim. Ben Zoma said to the sages, V'chi mazkirin yitziat Mitzrayim limot HaMashiach. Are we going to mention the going out of Egypt in the Messianic age? Hare Katuv, it is written in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 23, Hinei yamim ba'im ne'um Hashem, a time will come, says God, asher lo ye'amer od chai Hashem, asher ha'ela et b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, where you will no longer say, long live God who brought the Jewish people out of Egypt, but chai Hashem asher ha'ela ve'asher yavi et adat b'nei Yisrael me'eretz tzefona mikol ha'aratzot asher hidachtim otam shama. You will say instead, long live God, who has brought back the Jewish people from the lands of the north and from all the lands where he has scattered them. Ben Zoma said there will be a second exodus even greater than the first. And the sages said, you're right, but we will still mention the going out of Egypt even then, and they agreed that we will mention the two exoduses, the one in the days of Moses and the one foreseen by the prophet Jeremiah. Friends, Jeremiah made that prophecy 26 centuries ago, and we are living in its fulfillment. Jews have returned from exile. They have rebuilt the state of Israel. And unlike the days of the Exodus when they came from one country, Egypt, the Jews who have returned to Israel have returned from 103 different countries, speaking 82 different languages, most of them all at once. The return, the second exodus of our people, or the third if you include the Babylonian exile, this new exodus is in many ways more miraculous than the one that took place in the days of Moses. In fact, I have explicit proof that it is more miraculous, because the Torah says when the Israelites left Egypt, the Torah says, Vayhi b'shalach paro et ha'am, when Pharaoh let the people go, Hashem did not take them derech eretz Pelishtim by the straight road ki karovu, because it was close, because Hashem said, Pen yinachem ha'am birotam milchama v'shavu mitzrayma, because the people will see war and they'll want to go back to where they came from. Israel has been at a state of war or threats of terror for 70 years. And even in the heights of war, the Olim never stopped coming. That is a miracle that didn't even exist in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. So, if you ask yourself the simple question, what does faith do? Look at this story. Would Jews have done what no other people has ever done? Survive a 2,000-year exile, come back to their land of their beginnings, revive a language which had not been the language of ordinary speech for more than 2,000 years, and make Ivrit speak again, make the Jewish people live again, make the landscape of Eretz Yisrael green again. All these things that have never been done by any other people in all of history. Could they have happened had Jews not kept Pesach? Had they not said every single year, now we're here next year in Israel. Today, slaves, but tomorrow, free human beings. Could it have happened without Jews singing at the two climaxes of the Jewish year, at the Seder on Pesach and at Ne'ilah, the end of Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim? Had they not kept those mitzvot, would they ever have come back? The answer is no. Faith brought the Jewish people back to Israel. Faith rebuilds the ruins of Jerusalem. Faith changes the world because it changes us. And that faith has always meant that whether we knew it or not, the world knew that somehow this Jewish people, small and quite undistinguished in many ways, somehow did impossible things, because the Jewish people is the people who in themselves testify to something greater than themselves. And that is why we remain God's witnesses, God's ambassadors in the world. That is the miracle that faith brought about in our time. But the challenge is not by any means over. Last night or 2 nights ago, we were talking in Fuji with Chief Rabbi Lau about some of the problems facing the Jewish world today. You know, Hashem knows that if we're Jewish, we need aggravation. So he provides us with a lot of things to get worried about. Primarily assimilation and anti-Semitism. Gewalt, as they say. What do they say in Italian? Gewalt in Italian, exactly. I want you, please, to forget all the bad stuff you read in the newspapers, you see on television. I want you to forget all of that and just reflect on this. We've been around for a very long time, the better part of 4,000 years. We have known every situation from triumph to tragedy. We have been scattered across the globe. There is hardly a country anywhere in the world where Jews have not been. And yet, ask yourself, if ever before in 4,000 years, Jews had what we have now: sovereignty and independence in the state of Israel, freedom and equality in Chutz La'aretz, throughout the diaspora. Some centuries, a few, Jews had one or the other, but never in all of history did we have both. And that is what we have now. And let us seize this extraordinary opportunity to do what we can, whether we live in Israel or we live in the diaspora, to live our Judaism, to be proud of our Judaism, and turn our Judaism into a source of blessing, not just for us, but for the world. That is the challenge of our time. The trouble is, Jews overachieve, but Judaism often today underachieves. And now God has given us the prayers that our grandparents and their grandparents prayed for 2,000 years, everything they prayed for, except one thing, which was always the last of the prayers. What is the last Jewish prayer? For peace. We knew that would always be the last. But every prayer up to that has been answered, except that one. let us wear our Jewish identity with pride. There is one more challenge I would like to give to you. President Kvod Anasi Shel Medinat Yisrael, President Reuven Rivlin of Israel, very wise and good man, has spoken of an Israel of 4 minorities, none of whom communicate with one another. Chilonim, secular Israelis, Datiim, religious Zionist Israelis, and Charedim, the ultra-Orthodox, and he adds as the 4th minority, Palestinian Israelis. Recently, he added a 5th minority, us, Jews of the diaspora. Well, if we bracket out the Palestinians for a moment, who are important, but part of a different conversation, that leaves 4 minorities. Us in Chutz La'aretz, and the secular, religious, and ultra-religious in Israel. So there are 4 minorities. Well, does that remind you of anything on Pesach? We are the Arba Banim. We are the 4 different children. Now, we all know that we, whether we're secular or religious or all, we know that we are the Chachamim. We are the wise ones. The other guys, not sure whether you're a Rasha or a Tam or an Eno Yodea L'Shol, but nonetheless. But you know what worries me? You know, when Jews argue among themselves, when Jews judge their piety by how many people they refuse to speak with, when we fight among ourselves, we repeat the oldest and most painful of all Jewish sins, the sin that led to the exile in the first place. Joseph's brothers sell him to Egypt as a slave. Why? Because vayisna'u oto. They hated him. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. And they couldn't speak with him peacefully. And because of that, 210 years of exile, slavery, slow genocide, bread of affliction, the maror of slavery. We have to stop that now. We have to recognize that the Arba Banim, whichever of them is wise, whichever of them is a Rosh, what are they doing? They're sitting at the same table. They're eating the same matzah and moro. They are drinking the same 4 cups of wine of freedom. They are telling the same story, even though they give different interpretations to that story. They know that they are part of one family. This is what I pray for. I want to say that every one of them is beautiful in my eyes. I say about secular Israelis, these are the people who built the state of Israel, who defend the state of Israel. They are my heroes. The Charedim in Israel. Let us not forget the secular Israelis brought about the great miracle of our time, the rebirth of the Jewish state. But what did the Eder Haredit do? When they were almost completely wiped out in the Holocaust and only a handful survived, what did they do? They married, they had children, they rebuilt their communities, they rebuilt their institutions, all of them in Israel, in America, in a new land. They did the second great miracle of our time, the rebirth of the Jewish people. They are the ones who had children who today populate the Jewish world. What about the religious Zionist Israelis who created 3 new institutions that we never had before? We've been learning Torah for 38 centuries. Never before did we have a Hesder Yeshiva, where you are part of the army, but you're also learning. Bal Tshuva Yeshiva, where people returning tradition are learning. And most beautifully of all, women's seminaries. When did we have higher Jewish learning for women? Those are the real. And as for the Jews of Chutz La'aretz, the wonderful Jews of Florence, and all who are joining us here in Florence today, we are the ones who fight Israel's cause, who stand up in public when it's difficult to sometimes. And we are the people who live Judaism in a difficult environment and nonetheless stay loyal to our faith. So with that I conclude. Let us not ever think of agreeing about anything. I once had a conversation with the secular Israeli Amos Oz, and he began by saying, I don't think I am going to agree with the rabbi about everything, but then on most things, I don't agree with myself. So Jews will never agree, but let us sit around the same table. Let us tell the same story. Let us realize that Hashem has space for a great deal of differences. Let us live and affirm our Jewishness and be a light to the world. And let us thank Hashem that in our lifetime we have lived through an exodus and a return to Israel as great as any in Jewish history. And say, Me'et Hashem hayta zot, hiniflat be'einenu. This was from Hashem, and it is wondrous in our eyes. To all of you, Mo'adim l'simcha, happy Pesach.